Well, I did it. I made it through my first overnight, my first 24 hours almost in the new home in my tiny little horse trailer. Well, it's not as tiny as the white trailer, but someone had made a comment about asking me to share what my experiences were like the first time I ran away from home. And living this last 24 hours brought a lot of those memories back. And so I thought I wanted to just tell you some stories about what my first 24 hours was like in the first trailer, which was a wild ride. I've never got around, I think, sharing that story. Oh, and how this is different, but it's presenting its own challenges. And so with that, we're going to take a deep breath, and I will see you on the other side. There's freedom. It's like, I want to go over there. When are we going back over there? I don't want to live over here. Right, little dog? I don't like living over here. I want to go over there. One of the things that I had put in my mind when I left the first time was I was going to write a book about my experiences. That was at the very beginning. YouTube was only a few years old. I was still making videos, but I wanted to create a book that had a written narrative, pictures, and then have actual videos embedded in that book where you clicked on the video as you were reading so you could get just the full comprehensive experience. And that technology never really came to fruition. I think Apple had an iBook program that did that, but it just never happened. And the longer I went into my journey, the more that happened to me, especially those first couple years. I thought, oh my God, there's no way to write a book because now there's too much information and I don't know what to do with it. And so I just really had let that go. And one of the other things that happened is that most of the time when you have books about these kinds of experiences, number one, it's unique. At the time it was, but it's not now. But you really need a happy ending. And that's one of the big things that held me back, because I never had a definitive conclusion. You know, my plan was to find a place to live, find my tribe, you know, build a life, and go back to the way things had been kind of before. And one of the other critical components for a really good story is you have to have a conflict, you have to have something bad happen or something important happen, and then you have to have a resolution. And I never really had a definitive crisis that I could show you. I had one at a personal level, but it's just sort of been one long, drawn-out 9-year process. And to cap it off, there was no happy ending. I didn't fall in love and get married. I didn't become a YouTube star. I didn't make a lot of money. Nothing that makes the camera happy or a book with a great ending happened. You know, my real story was an internal one. It was one that was just private for me, and a journey I took that did give me what I was looking for. I think you know, one of the things that happened to me last summer was that I found what I was looking for, but it wasn't what I wanted to find. And so I've spent the last year really, you know, struggling with that whole process. So here's just a snapshot between that 24 hours and sort of this 24 hours. And what happened when I was in California is, you know, I had the little white trailer, and the last couple of weeks, because I was losing my house, and so I had to get out of the house by a certain date, but I wasn't ready to leave California yet, so I ended up having to store my little white trailer down the hill and live for 2 more weeks kind of in limbo before I left. I don't remember exactly why, but I think I was waiting for some paperwork and things like that. So I didn't have access to my little white trailer, so it wasn't organized. I ended up, because I was in such a time crunch, just sort of throwing things into it, thinking at some point, you know, I would land somewhere and I would get organized. Because I did not pack to be a nomad. I packed to move. My plan was to live a year in that trailer, go find my right place, my right people, my right life, have a little bit of an adventure, and then set up shop and recreate the old system. obviously that didn't happen. So the trailer was down the hill. It was in August. I think it was August 11th or 12th when I was left in 2011. So it was really hot, and I had the old Bronco with no air conditioning and hills to climb. So my plan was to leave super early and stop, before I hit the heat of the day. And what I didn't know then, and I do know now, is I have about a 200-mile window where it just becomes too stressful. I think because, especially when it's new, you're just like this. And so after about 4 hours of driving, it's, I got to get out of here. But my 24-hour window did not go as planned. So I was down at the RV yard. My mom was there. I don't know what that was. We were getting ready to say goodbye. It was very emotional. I didn't know if I was ever going to see her again because that was still kind of, in the end of the world scenario. And the guy who ran the park. And so, I was hooked up. I was pulled out. We were both standing a little bit of a distance from the trailer. And, we were saying our goodbyes. It was late. It was like 9 o'clock. So I was frustrated because it was already really late. And there was a dip because the front of my trailer was overpacked, and my little Bronco just is not a good tow vehicle. And so there was a dip, and I looked and I said to the RV guy, the RV lot guy, I said, "Is that okay?" And then he looks at me and goes, "Well, you're not really hooked up correctly." So it was bad enough that I had a terrible weight distribution, and that wasn't really my fault because I didn't know and I couldn't get it sorted. But if I had not had him tell me that, I would have lost my connection just bumping out of the driveway. So thank goodness, right? So I hook up, we get in the car, it's me, it's the two cats. I have the cats in a little crate. The back is stuffed all the way to the top. I'm headed, and my first pit stop is for Blythe, California, where I've got a Motel 6 plan to go park there. My plan was just to pull in and to sleep in the hotel overnight. So we're driving down to Blythe, but there's like a 10-mile hill there, which I forgot about. So I get pulled up most of it as I'm watching my Bronco overheat. I made the fatal mistake, which I didn't know at the time, of stopping and turning the car off. If your car is overheating when you're pulling, you need to run the engine with the heater and let it cool down naturally before you turn the car off, because you can ruin your engine. Luckily, that did not happen to me, but the radiator overflowed, and it was just a big fat mess. The car was, way too hot. So I'm stuck in this rest stop, obviously not knowing anybody, and trying to figure out what to do. So panic phone calls home. Some guy looks at it and says, it'll probably be okay when it cools down, but I had to wait. So I had to wait a couple hours for it to cool down. So now it's even later and hotter. I didn't get out of there till close to noon. I still have a ways to go. It's really hot. I have no air conditioning. So I also had a little temperature gauge in the car with me because the cats, as another FYI, they have a body temperature of 101, 102, but they will go into heat stroke if you get them over their natural body temperature. And so I'm watching the temperature gauge. So we're getting closer and closer to Blythe, and I look down, and it's 107 in the car, and the cats are making this weird noise. And so I'm looking at the cats, and they're like, they're overheating. My one little boy cat was older, and so much more fragile. I'm screaming and I'm hysterical because now I'm afraid I'm going to kill my cats. So I'm pulling over, I take my water bottle, I'm dumping water on them. I'm crying hysterically because what do, right? I have to get somewhere cooler for them because it's not going to get any warmer. For those of you who live in the desert, the worst peak hours between 3 to 4, but it stays hot for a long time. So I think I still had about 30 or 45 more miles to go, and I'm crying. I'm missing my cats. They're both gone. Okay, so I'm crying hysterically. I'm just, white-knuckling it, and I can't speed because I have the trailer on the back that I really don't know how to drive. So I am a danger to society in my trailer and my Bronco. I get to the Motel 6. So, by the grace of God, right, I get there. I have this little system set up because I can't leave the cats in the car, right? So I have the crate, which looks, like it says dark screen, so it looks like a black box, sitting on one of those pulleys that you use, that you pull with furniture. So I'm pulling like a wagon with my 2 cats in the crate. I pull them into the Motel 6 front room, where the guest guy is, and he's, my hair is wild, I'm sweaty, my face is all red, I'm just, not calm and rational, and I'm so hysterical, but I'm also so happy because my cats aren't dead and I made it. So, he's obviously like, all right, lady, whatever. And so we get our room, we check in, we take a shower, we cool down. I've lost that video from the first day. So that was really kind of my first day. I just picked up, I did it the second day. This time, I went out to my car. The second day, I went out my car to move it, and it doesn't start. So again, hysterics, because now I've broken my Bronco, and I'm in, I think, Casa Grande, Arizona. And it turns out this Bronco has what's called vapor lock, so this would be an ongoing issue where if it overheats, it doesn't start, and I have to wait for it to cool down. Anyway, so that was sort of the nightmare, and I did that for 4 days till I got to Silver City, and I pulled in, I had planned on going to a KOA, and just huge relief, right? I'm in a campground. And that was my first night in the trailer. And so I'm so deeply exhausted, but I can't sleep in there because the entire bed is covered with mounds and mounds of my stuff. So that first day after driving, So that first day after driving 24, my 4 or 5 hours, all uphill, it's a slow uphill to Silver City, panicking. I pull in and I take everything out of my trailer and somehow shrink it, because a lot of it was packaging, to try to protect it on the drive. And we made it. So we got through that first night. The next big bump for me was a few days later when I got to my first permanent place, was a farm that I was going to spend a couple weeks on farming in exchange for living there. And that was sort of the beginning of my trying to find my rhythm. But what happened driving to that farm was I heard this weird noise, right? And so I'm not sure what's going on, but because the windows are down because it's hot, I heard something that was wrong. Well, it turns out the white trailer, the frame on it was bent, and it fell, and it was riding one of my tires. So now I'm at somebody's farm with a trailer that can't travel in a population of 100, because I'm in this dinky little town. I'm, an hour away from Silver City, which is the main town. And by the grace of, right, there turns out there's a guy who's just moved back into town that can weld it and fix it. So $400 later, I got my trailer lifted 2 inches. He put in a steel beam and he lifted both sides 2 inches so that it was off the tire. But I've been holding my breath driving it ever since. So there's a lot more, but that was my first 24 hours. Transitioning, right? 9 years later, here I am sitting in my horse trailer because obviously I decided that I liked this life, and it's been 5 years in the planning. 5 years ago, I decided I wanted a horse trailer. A year later, I bought it. It sat here for 4 years. And then last February, I finally started working on it and moved in officially last night. And, I didn't sleep well. My little pillow that I picked, I was cold. I left the doorway, the divider doorway open. But it was like having your front door open all night, and that didn't have enough blankets. But huge difference between then and now, with just little inconveniences. I didn't have it set up well, like I couldn't find how to wash my face, I couldn't find my Kleenex, there were bumps in the road about the daily routine, so there's still a ton of work to do to get this one sorted and that one cleaned out. But I wanted to tell that story of the first 24 hours because what you saw in the title, my homeless life is brutal. My first part of my homeless life was brutal, and there was no happy ending or happily ever after. And the reason I want to start telling that kind of a story with this experience is because, what we see is all these people who are having a super fabulous life. And my first couple years were terrible. They were just terrible. And it took me a long time to get in the rhythm of this. It took me a long time to heal from the first couple years. And so we're just facing a moment in time that's not going to be like what it's been, where it's going to be an adventure for everybody. And a lot of people are going to be facing real homelessness. And real homelessness is, I don't have a backup plan. I don't have a place I can go home to and regroup. This isn't temporary. I didn't get to practice. I just got launched into it. It's scary. It's overwhelming. You don't know what's going to happen to you. You don't know if you're going to be okay. You don't know how you're going to pay for your life. You don't know how you're going to find food. You don't even know where you're going to take your next shower. So these are just real things that I think it's important to talk about both sides because this experience for me was brutal. It was hard. But when I started thinking about things the other day about what my life means to me is that I don't live for the fantasy and happily ever after. What has meaning and value to me is overcome. And I think I've made a couple videos now where I've talked about, adversity and overcome. They just hold so much more value for me. And when I visualize sitting around the campfire, which is kind of what YouTube videos are, and which story I want to tell the story that's like the war story, that's the survival story, that's the hard road story, and see how far I've come. I don't want to talk about fairy tale endings or fantasies or happily ever after. I just don't think that's who I am. So that's just a little tiny window that went on for a very long time. And with that, we're going to take a deep breath, and I, my friends, will probably see you next time. There is so much to go do, and I don't want to go do any of it. But hey, it's going to rain again tonight, so time to get busy.